In this episode, it's old versus new as Tazaki duels against London. Hey there, my name is Rex, episode 14 of Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush, the beginning of a brand new arc coming off of last week's episode. This one I thought was a pretty good one as things start off as London Kirishima shows up to UTS asking them to carry out a job for him to find this missing girl that's in the alien residential area underground where all the dangerous aliens are. So that's the inciting incident. Also at the same time, Udius is promoted, so Yuhi is feeling sort of inadequate, or he has the feeling that he wants to move up, he wants to get promoted, so he wants to do more. Although all of the adults at UTS don't want them to go down to the alien residential area because it's dangerous there, and so Tazaki decides to duel against London. Their duel will decide what happens if they're able to go, and it's overall a nice little duel, finally getting to see Tazaki duel and also getting to see London duel now, because he kind of hasn't done a whole lot since he's been introduced. You know, getting to see them both now in this duel is pretty neat, and like overall, things are still moved along with the plot in this episode because, you know, whatever they're going to find underground is going to lead into more alien shenanigans, and I think that it's overall like a good episode to come off of that big arc, and it also makes sense especially that all of the adults would be worried for the twins and for Udius and wouldn't want them going down there. So the duel overall is pretty neat, getting to see each of these characters, although one interesting thing is that Tazaki mentions his name during this duel. He calls himself Galaxin Tazaki, so there's the whole question of whether he was actually Galliant exactly, so it seems like he isn't, and so that kind of throws a lot of like theories of how this series relates to Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, but I've got some theories and I'll go ahead and discuss that after this duel. So the duel goes pretty well. London is sending monsters face down, and at first I thought maybe we'd see flip effects, but I realized that flip effects aren't in Rush duels, but he has a deck comprised of fairy monsters, angel monsters, and they're all musically inclined, which I think is a pretty neat inversion on Roa from the last series. They're still music based, but they're angels instead of demons, so that's kind of cool. Galliant has a bunch of construction based monsters, more so digging based, but they're still kind of like the construction beast, very similar to what we saw Galliant use in the previous series, and he focuses on piercing damage, which seems like a bad matchup for London, who's set a bunch of monsters. He brings out his ace and deals a bunch of damage to London, and back onto London's turn, London summons his ace, then sets all of Tazaki's monsters face down, and then inflicts piercing to him. So it's actually kind of neat getting to see that both of these characters were using piercing effects in order to win the duel and in order to deal damage. London had also dealt damage with a card effect by flipping his monster face down and then flipping it back up, dealing damage based on its attack. So getting to see that they had some similar strategies in their decks, even though they were both very different, was pretty neat. But while they were dueling, Udius, Yuhi, and Yomu snuck off with a map to go ahead and head to the alien residential area. And the episode ends off with all of the adults showing up, giving them a lunchbox and wishing them well, realizing after this duel that, you know, they should be allowed to head out and adventure into something else and, you know, challenge themselves in some way to do something maybe a little dangerous, but that would work toward their growth. So overall, I think it's really nice because you have that little emotional core to these characters that we've kind of come to know. Mostly Tazaki, because I think we spend the most time with him out of any adults, and we get to see the relationship that he has with the twins and with Udius now. And again, just getting to see some other characters duel for a change was pretty nice. So I thought this was a neat episode. Again, there are a lot of questions about how it ties into the previous series, Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, because I think a good amount of us had kind of been under the assumption that it was maybe 50-ish years after last series, maybe 50 to like 60, give or take, and we had assumed that maybe all the adults were the exact characters, but now that we actually have Tazaki's first name being Galaxin Tazaki rather than Galliant Tazaki, that throws a lot of things in there. There is also the fact that the adults had specifically mentioned, or it was brought up, that there was a phrase passed down through UTS for generations, and generations implies more than just, you know, 2 generations. So the whole idea of Yuga being the father or the grandfather of the twins is kind of thrown out there. But I suppose, you know, while there could be the whole alternate universe in play, which I think that is possible given how, you know, everything that went on with 7s, I'm almost more inclined to believe that right now Go Rush is much farther into the future than we had originally thought, and that the adult characters just so happen to look like some of their ancestors, and, you know, it's meant for the audience who watched the previous series to be like, hey, you know, these are similar character designs, and, you know, these have the same voice actors, so it's just kind of fun seeing them, but, you know, seeing them kind of in a different way, taking on different roles, having different names, of course, and different monsters in their decks. And I think that also works out because then so many other characters would then be allowed to be so different from their counterparts counterparts, but while still being the same, and again, you know, being like nice little winks and nods to the people who watched Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s. But at the same time, I think that would also make much more sense, because then it would allow this little town, Mutsuba Town, to be around for so long, and for UTS to be around for so long, and for aliens to have been living among humans for this long. So I think that that's kind of the case that we're going with the series, is that it's, you know, maybe 100 years minimum, maybe a few hundred years after the events of Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, and so this is just this little society that's been built with the descendants of these characters, and by descendants, you know, like great grandchildren, but they're still meant to resemble their ancestors, just in nice little funny ways. Those are just at least my thoughts in terms of like how everything fits together. I think the big thing was that it was mentioned UTS has been around for generations, and that there was a motto passed down for generations, or an ideal passed down for generations. But the last thing I can't believe I forgot to mention during this episode is that while the main crew is on the train heading to the alien residential area, they're given the name of the missing girl that they're meant to find, and her name is Yuna Goha. So that's also a big thing too, you know, especially for those of us who watched the previous series, just thinking, okay, now we're going to get to see the Goha character in this series. We're going to get to see what they're up to, and we know that they're going to be important, especially if they're going to be a descendant of one of the Goha siblings. So I almost have a feeling that this episode in particular is going to start to set up how Yu-Gi-Oh! Go Rush connects to Yu-Gi-Oh! 7s, because we did get important pieces of information like Tazaki's first name, the fact that UTS has been around for generations, and the fact that now we're going to be meeting a Goha character. But those are my thoughts on the episode. I honestly really liked it. Comparing it to the usual Yu-Gi-Oh! Rush Duel anime first episode back after a big arc, I think that this is kind of one of the better ones, because things get started immediately with, you know, a fun little duel and getting to explore some other characters that we had met before, but now actually get to see them in action. So let me know what you think in the comments below, and if you enjoyed this episode and what your thoughts on it are as well. And if you enjoyed the video, leave a like and subscribe to show your support, and hopefully I feel like I always promise more Yu-Gi-Oh! Stuff on this channel. I think this summer I'm starting to turn things around with content in general, because those of you who know, my main channel is my main focus, because that one pays the rent. But I do definitely love talking about Yu-Gi-Oh! Every week here on this channel, and hopefully we can do some more, but bully me in the comments so I can remember too. But anyway, this has been Rex. Have a nice day.